Welcome to CBC Weekly Talk. My name is Anastasia Lavrina. Yesterday, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, mediated by Russian President Vladimir Putin, discussed relations between the two countries in the Kremlin. President Ilham Aliyev said after Armenia's recognition of Karabakh as a part of Azerbaijan, issue of agreeing on other points of peace treaty will be much smoother. What are the possibility for normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia based on the mutual recognition of territorial integrity and sovereignty? All the details in my program now. My guest now from Russia, Stanislav Prichin, Senior Research Fellow in the Institute of World Economy and International Relations. Hello, Stanislav.
Hello, Anastasia.
Hello, nice to see you. And our guest from Turkey, Hasan Ünal, Professor of Political Science and International Relations of Turkey's Maltepe University. Hello and welcome to our program.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for joining our discussion. So, Stanislav, trilateral talks between the leaders of Azerbaijan, Russia and Armenia took place yesterday in Moscow. In general, how would you rate the outcomes?
Of course, expectations were quite high, and a lot of observers thought that this meeting might be a real breakthrough, especially after two meetings in Washington and Brussels on the high level. But unfortunately, this expectation didn't meet the reality, because we saw since the beginning of negotiations, open part of meeting, Armenian Prime Minister wasn't constructive, and prior to his visit to Moscow, he gave a huge interview where he assumed that as a possible consequence of problem with relations Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, Armenia can leave the Collective Security Treaty Organization. And of course, this passage before the important diplomatic round wasn't considered as a constructive, especially in Moscow, and I assume in Baku as well. And as a result, we saw the open polemic between the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, and the prime minister of Armenia. As we see the timing, the third sides meeting took not so much time. And despite the fact that officially were mentioned that result might be a special agreement on the opening roads, transport roads in the region, especially the Zangezur corridor, we didn't see any statements, we didn't see any open documents which were approved. And the only one information that in a week the Commission on the level of the deputy prime ministers will meet and will discuss the transportation issues in the region, and possibly this is the only one more or less visible result of this round of meeting, unfortunately.
Mr. Ünal, I also would like to know your opinion. What do you think about the yesterday's meeting held in Kremlin between the leaders of three countries? What are the expectations from the next meetings between the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Well, my expectation is that it won't take long before Armenia comes down to the negotiating table and signs to a peace treaty with Azerbaijan, an overall peace treaty recognizing Azerbaijan in its territorial integrity. And as Pashinyan pointed out, before this particular meeting that took place yesterday, Armenia is now somehow prepared to recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. This is, I suppose, a very important development. This is the positive side of that. The downside may be that, as Pashinyan pointed out, that he wants certain status for those Armenians who still live in particularly Hankendi and in certain other parts of Karabakh, but not many. But I wouldn't ever imagine Azerbaijan agreeing to that, because Azerbaijan considers the Armenians living in Hankendi and other parts of Azerbaijan as an internal matter for Azerbaijan to deal with. That's quite understandable, because after all, to get it into some sort of international agreement, would not be something Azerbaijan would consider. Instead, there may be, in terms of Azerbaijan's constitutional status and the legal framework of Azerbaijan, whoever is a citizen of Azerbaijan is entitled to basically enjoy all the rights and freedoms that the Azerbaijani constitutional framework basically offers. So apart from that, I would certainly see the Armenia's position positively, in the sense that Armenia will have to agree to a peace treaty with Azerbaijan. I mean, Pashinyan keeps approaching the West in various ways, both the Europeans and the Americans and others. But we know for a fact that in a multipolar world order, neither Europe nor the United States is in a position to support Armenia up to an extent where Armenia would be able to resume fighting, if you like, against Azerbaijan. So what happened in 2020 during the Second Karabakh War has happened, and it is now on the basis of what happened in that war, a peace treaty will have to come out. So the Russian basically mediation is something I would see very positively, because Russia certainly keeps away all the toxic influence of the Armenian diaspora communities in France and United States away from Armenia. But on the question of Armenia sort of threatening to leave the collective security agreement, collective security pact, if you like, it may be just a posture now, whether it is serious or not. On the one hand, for instance, Armenia doesn't offer Russia any strategic value anymore. It used to be perhaps strategically valuable in the early 1990s, because at the time under Yeltsin and in the first years after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Russian overall strategy wasn't terribly clear. So there were bits and pieces that were sort of working against each other. But what we basically understood at the time, Russia was trying to drive a wedge between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So the Armenian occupation of the Azerbaijani territories, the whole of Karabakh, as well as the 7 regions that surround Karabakh, was perhaps seen positively back in Moscow, because with Armenia controlling all those territories, a Baku-Ceyhan pipeline could not materialize. But as the Russians realized, as the Russian government realized later in the years, that Turkey and Azerbaijan getting together, managing to basically build a pipeline through Tbilisi, that project came to an end. And with Putin's takeover of Russia, things began, the whole strategic, if you like, outlook in the region changed. Now Putin focusing on countering NATO and the West, that had by that stage was coming up to Russia's borders, indeed, to Ukraine's border, was much more important a point for Russia to deal with than to deal with an Armenia which offered Russia no strategic value. And this is what it is now. And that is why during the course of the Second Karabakh War, Moscow basically remained passive, citing reasons that for its passivity, that the fighting that was going on was not necessarily going on in Azerbaijani territory, in Armenia territories, but it was solely on the Azerbaijani territories. So we've got from there to today's situation. Now we have a multipolar world order with Russia very much focused, indeed totally consumed in its fight against the West, and with West which is embroiled in a bitter fight against Russia. None is going to basically raise a finger for Armenia for nothing. So therefore, Armenia will have to come to its senses one way or the other. It can basically threaten to withdraw from the collective security pact, but so what?
Do you think that is possible? Because Armenia preferred to use this card before the meeting when Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan started to say that Armenia may decide to leave Organization for Collective Security. Maybe in order to get any kind of support from the Russian side, but from yesterday meeting we saw that Russia is trying to give objectivity and is not going to support Armenia against Azerbaijan as probably in Yerevan they were expecting for.
Well, certainly, as I was trying and as you summarized, basically that is what it is. So if Armenia gets out of that collective defense organization, what pact is it going to become part of? Does it entertain the idea that it'll enter NATO, for instance, where Turkey is a full member? So basically, these are all posturing, and it is presumably also to do with internal Armenian politics. After all, Armenia is going through a terrible trauma after the terrible defeat at the hands of the Azerbaijani armed forces in the Second Karabakh War. The Armenia's legend about Armenian army's legend about invincibility and all that is broken down into pieces. So, okay, you can basically sort of employ a changing posture from one side to the other. Pashinyan always wanted to basically gravitate Armenia towards the West, but how would you do it? The West is so busy and so, as I said, embroiled in its own fight against Russia. Azerbaijan has come out in the whole Western world's struggle against Russia as a more important country because it supplies the West with energy. It cannot basically replace Russia, but at least it is a source of energy for Europe in particular, and the European Union countries and the others are not going to basically, how shall I say, go and do whatever they can to prop up Armenia against Azerbaijan. They can support Armenia, and they should actually. Even Turkey and Azerbaijan have made it quite clear on more than one occasion that they would be prepared to support Armenia to stand on its own feet, to make sure that Armenia basically benefits from all the trade and economic activity across the region.
Let me ask one additional question about economic prosperity in the region, because Zangezur corridor is one of the key elements, the key project, which is in the interest of the West and Russia. What makes Zangezur so important? And if we speak about the today's reality, what are the perspectives for this project? Nikol Pashinyan himself was so much scared the word corridor, but the project itself plays a significant role not only for Azerbaijan and Armenia, but for Russia, for European Union, for the United States. That means that for Armenia there is no any alternative way rather than to agree to follow the obligation it took by signing the trilateral statement with Azerbaijan and Russia on November 2020.
Well, again, as you pointed out, the 10th of November trilateral agreement is quite clear, and it basically stipulates the opening of a corridor from the westernmost Azerbaijani territories to Azerbaijani Autonomous Republic Nakhchivan, and through Nakhchivan, of course, into Turkey. So that is going to be an important corridor. But it doesn't just benefit Turkey and Azerbaijan, and it would also bring in lots of opportunities for Armenia too. And as far as I can see, that would be also the only way through which Armenia can actually reach out to Russia on land, because Armenia has no land connection with Russia. And with Georgia and Russia relations very much strained, then Armenia, which needs Russia for so many things, and having no land connection with Russia is something problematic. And that, while the Armenians can always retort and say, well, yes, you're talking about land connectivity to Russia, but only through Azerbaijani territories. Yes, but it is something that is an opportunity. Unless you entertain ideas of regaining Azerbaijani territories, recapturing Azerbaijani territories, and unless you live in a fool's paradise like in the 19th century of conquest and what have you, then this is a proper, basically, opportunity for you to look at. As you pointed out, this corridor will link Turkey, Azerbaijan directly and to Central Asia, which is also important, and at the same time offer Armenia lots of opportunities. Now, if Armenia, for instance, leaves the collective security pact, then and turns its back to Moscow, and at the same time it doesn't basically sign up to a peace treaty with Azerbaijan and normalizes its relations with Turkey, what or who else does Armenia think that it can actually trust on in the region? So Armenia would then have no one to, how shall I say, lean on.
Indeed,
this is the only thing Armenia will have to do in the end. And I would think this is the Armenian Prime Minister thinks. The Armenian Prime Minister, from the way he makes statements about very serious matters, one can conclude that he thinks, this is one way of negotiating. You start from a very, how shall I say, up position, and then you come down to something achievable. But I suppose the Russians and the international all these diplomats and experts.
This actually was my next question to you. Considering that Armenia officially recognized Karabakh as a part of Azerbaijan, can internal political processes in this country affect the negotiation process? Nikol Pashinyan may say that he agreed to recognize the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and he is not against opening of transport communication in the region. But we know about unstable political position inside the country. So how these processes may affect the negotiation process between Baku and Yerevan?
Well, difficult to basically guess. Your guess is as good as mine on that. But what I would say that Pashinyan's actually election or re-election after he lost the war in late 2020 may be indicative of what the Armenian society wants. So Pashinyan is presumably the only politician, however much inexperienced he may be, hasn't been corrupted yet, if you like. Okay, so the Armenian people basically became quite frustrated with all this talk of anti-Turkey, anti-Azerbaijan, and greater Armenia. You know, Armenia aspiring to become a huge state, grabbing territories from Turkey, from Azerbaijan, from Georgia, from even Russia. You know, there was no, all these boundless aspirations and all these talk about Armenian military invincibility and all that, basically broken down, as I said. So what Pashinyan offered to the people was peace, stability, and economic development. Now, on the basis of the third point, the economic development, or at least betterment of the economy, this is what the Armenian people seem to basically elected him or re-elected him again. Otherwise, you know, he just lost the war, and the Armenian people could have simply thrown him under the bus, but they didn't. So on the basis of that assumption, the people of Armenia, or a considerable section of people of Armenia, is not so much, how shall I say, for 19th century style conquest and what have you. A proper peace treaty would certainly calm down the Armenian populace. It is not going to be easy, perhaps, but you know, someone will have to do it. So I would think that Pashinyan is using his non-existent diplomatic skills to gain certain benefits for Armenia, in return for agreeing to a proper peace treaty with overall peace treaty with Azerbaijan.
Mr. Unal, another very important topic I would like to talk with you. Turkey will hold a runoff elections on May 28. How do you see the current political landscape in Turkey?
Well, we have had elections in the past, and the election times are quite sort of, enjoyable to observe on the one hand, but on the other, there may be elections sometimes between contenders neck and neck. But this is the second elections after Turkey basically adopted the presidential system. And in the past, we used to talk about which party would gain what percentage of the votes. Now we are talking about the presidential candidates, the contest between them being neck and neck. So this is one point which makes this election perhaps a little more interesting than the previous ones. But what makes it the present elections much more important, I suppose, and interesting in the eyes of the international community is the fact that there is so much focus on the Turkish elections, both from the West. In particular, the US media has been hyping up the opposition contender Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu to be the next election and replacing Erdogan, and basically throwing Erdogan under the bus and getting rid of him and his foreign policy and all that. But at the same time, there is also focus by Russia, Azerbaijan, China, and others on the outcome of the elections. So I hardly believe that Kılıçdaroğlu would actually lead a clear victory. My predictions came out true in the first round. In the runoff, I would think Erdogan is I wouldn't say much more, but certainly more likely to win the elections. He's already secured a comfortable majority in the parliament, not because he and his ally MHP got that much vote to basically clear a triumphant victory in the parliament, but because of the inexperienced or mishandling of the opposition leader, because he basically offered so many seats to some of the parties with which he allied himself, and then it turned out that they almost have no votes. They have no voters at all. So it turned out it was in shambles. You know, the way he dealt with the alliance and the division of the seats in the parliament and all that has come under fire. You know, he's going to be more and more under fire after the runoff, if, as expected, he loses the elections.
Indeed, we know that the candidate who came in third in Turkey's presidential election, Sinan Ogan, last week announced it on Monday that he was endorsing President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the runoff vote on Sunday, granting Mr. Erdogan an additional boost against his remaining challenger. How will actually the elections in Turkey will affect the position of West and the future relations between Turkey and West and Turkey and Russia? Because the current relations between Turkey and Russia is being played by different parties, by different experts who were trying to predict the outcomes of the elections. That's why it's quite interesting to understand what will be the next step after the elections in the foreign policy of Turkey towards West and Russia.
Well, if, as expected, Erdogan wins, then I would say that Turkey's foreign policy will continue as it has been over the last few years. Basically, anybody who basically leads Turkey should follow a similar pattern. Even if the opposition were to win, then they should carry on with the same line of policy, because in a multipolar world order, this is what Turkey should do. First of all, Turkey has lots and lots of economic and trading interests with Russia. To basically flourish the Turkish-Russian rapprochement is in the interest of both Ankara and Moscow. In addition to the economic and trade relations, the two countries are now cooperating in nuclear power plant and nuclear energy, plus the two countries have been basically consulting each other over political matters across the region and beyond. We saw the first positive outcome of that consultation during the Second Karabakh War, for instance. But for the Turkish-Russian rapprochement, the handling of the Karabakh War would not have been so smooth as it was. You know, it might have things would have gone into uncharted waters. You never know. And over a number of other issues, again, initially Turkey and Russia were at loggerheads with each other, but then gradually they learned how to basically settle those problems and then turn even problematic issues into some opportunities of one sort or the other. So this should continue. This doesn't, however, mean that Turkey should turn its back to the West. It is not turning its back to the West. You know, as a major member of NATO country with the second largest, biggest and effective armed forces within the alliance after the United States, it basically has the capability of projecting power beyond its borders in more than one region. And so it will carry on with NATO membership and all that, and with its relations with the United States and the collective world, collective West in general. But this is not going to basically preclude Turkey from furthering its interests and relations with Russia, China, Iran, and others. Basically, we are in an era where even Saudis and Iran are now coming closer to each other and sorting out all those issues that we for decades thought could not be soluble at all. You see what I mean? So why should Turkey basically simply lean on Turkey, on the West? Why should Turkey join anti-Russia sanctions? Why should Turkey, but at the same time, turn its back to the West? None is practical policy options that Turkey should take up. So on that basis, basically, what Turkey has been doing over the last few years is the right thing. I mean, I used to be a very vociferous critic of Erdogan's foreign policy, because for about 10 years or so, their posturing in the Middle East and across the Eastern Mediterranean turned everybody against Turkey. It was a policy line inspired by Islamism and ideology and all that, which basically brought in no benefit at all, but turned everybody against Turkey, including Russia at the time. Don't forget, we brought down a Russian fighter jet for no reason. So we came from that position to this position, to this posturing, which is good. So therefore, whoever basically is at the helm of Turkey should be doing this. But the problem was the opposition contenders and their spokespersons made a lot of anti-Russia utterances, and the main opposition contender even came out criticizing Russia for some of the sex scandal videos and blah blah, which was totally unconvincing, because when you basically study all the facts one by one, his claims didn't hold water, but he did it. And the other spokespersons were openly anti-Russia, and they were indicating that Turkey would certainly join the anti-Russia sanctions and all that, which is senseless. So therefore, as expected, if Erdogan wins, basically, this foreign policy that Turkey has been pursuing over the last few years, which is very much in line with Turkey's national interests, is likely to continue too.
Well, we will see how the situation will be developed this Sunday. Mr. Unal, thank you so much for joining CBC Weekly Talk. It was a real pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Just to remind you, watch CBC Weekly Talk. My name is Anastasia Lavrina. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.